Good afternoon. Welcome to the EnableComp webinar to discuss the workers' compensation billing for hospitals, five steps to success. My name is Allie Connor, and I will be your host for today. This webinar is being recorded, and your line is muted, but we absolutely encourage you to ask questions throughout the presentation in the Q&A panel, and then we will answer them at the end. So let's go ahead and get started. I'd like to introduce our speakers for today. Ken Green is our Vice President of Client Services, and Jesse Larison is our Vice President of Managed Care.
Welcome, everybody. This is Ken. Nice to speak with you, and I know I've met most of you through the last few weeks at the HFMA travels. What I thought I would do today, and I guess special thanks out to HFMA South Carolina for sponsoring this event for us. We really appreciate it. What I thought I'd do is start with one slide, just to level set our backgrounds and to see, you'll be able to see where our best practices come from. And this one slide really is about EnableComp. We'll keep it short and sweet. But we are a specialized company with 18 years of history working exclusively in the workplace of workers' comp. We currently have over 800 hospitals nationally. You can see on the map, we started in Tennessee, and we're branched out quite extensively throughout the Southeast, East Coast. And at the time, we're adding additional sales folks going off towards the Midwest and West. So we're growing nationwide very quickly. Part of the things that really make us different or helped us build our best practices is technology. Technology is key to a lot of our success. It's a way to really level set ourselves and compete against our payer friends, matching up against their technologies. The best way to think of it, I think, is think about FedEx. We've all done business with FedEx in years gone by, and if you think of how they are able to track a package from leaving the store by which you purchased it, track it through the processes, traveling around the country, and ending up on your front doorstep where you might be signing for it. All along the way, we know that they know where the package is. Well, think of that same practice and process when you think of what it takes to do successful work comp. We use technology, we level technology to basically track every transaction against every payer. So there's a huge database that we've compiled over the last 18 years that gives us true advantage, again, to work with or against, depending on how you want to look at it, the payer group. They use analytics, we use analytics. We use means to track them, they use means to track us or avoid us. So that's a true advantage that a lot of the companies in our workspace bring to the marketplace, and it gives your folks a real chance of winning against the way the payers work. Over the years, we've collected over $1 billion in collection. So again, we have a lot of experience against the majority of the payers across the country. Jesse, why don't you take it and talk a little bit about the history of work comp?
Yeah, I appreciate that, Ken. And we've given this discussion before in other environments. We've always found that some context goes a long way to understand how work comp works within the hospital environment. What is the impact to hospitals as it comes to work comp revenue cycle? But, painting a picture to understand what work comp really is, I think is key. To really understand how to deal with work comp, how to establish those best practices. And work comp, by and large, is unknown to many people in the work comp, revenue cycle world. So let's talk a little bit about how we got here in the first place. Let's step back. Let's step back about 130 years ago to the 1880s in Germany. The chancellor there introduced a mandatory state-run accident compensation program, which was unique anywhere in the world. It paid benefits to injured workers for up to 13 weeks from a fund that was jointly financed by workers and their employers, which was really kind of revolutionary for its time. Previous to that, there was no type of benefit reciprocation between employers and workers as it related to work injuries. Now, here in the United States, there were some voluntary laws in place around the country that gave some protection to workers, but it wasn't until the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory fire in 1911, which killed over 130 people, which really drew a lot of eyes toward occupational injury and the rules and the laws from state to state around that. So a lot of states started looking at their constitutions and altered those things to make room for the very first types of work comp legislation. And this progressed for 20 years or so until 1930. Almost every state had enacted work comp reform, all but four. In 1948, Mississippi kind of was the last state to put in place work comp regulations. And what this really did was it created the first national social insurance program. Now, this predates Medicare, Medicaid, things that all of us really understand well within the work comp revenue cycle. Work comp was the first one like it. Now, when we talk about work comp on the payer side, work comp is referred to as the grand bargain, and you may hear adjusters or insurers talk about the grand bargain. And the grand bargain is something that's unique to work comp, and what it really means is, you know, if you take care of my work comp injury, Mr. Employer, I'm not going to sue you for negligence. That's the deal. And typically the system works very well. It gives employees the confidence to be able to show up and come to work every day and potentially do dangerous things. It also motivates employers and insurance companies to spend time and money and invest on safety training, accident prevention, all of those things, because they know if something happens to their injured worker, they've got a responsibility to take care of that person. Now, over time, this program has grown and grown and grown to the point where it's you see more than 3 million work comp cases every year and $92 billion in benefits paid out. It's a massive social insurance program. Now, when we talk about what work comp means, let's ask the folks on the call. What's one word that describes work comp to you? Allie, can we pull up that poll?
Yep. So on your right side of your screen, just click all that apply. What's one word that describes work comp to you? And we'll leave that open for a couple seconds here.
Ken, these are some words that we've had tossed around, I guess, in the past. When you talk to folks about work comp, you get a lot of these, I guess.
I don't get easy.
We haven't seen any votes for easy yet. Got some coming in. Yeah. Got a few more coming in. Allie, let's just give it another few seconds, and let's share this with the folks on the call.
Okay.
Go. Yeah, I think that's good. Let's see what we got here, huh?
Got a few more seconds.
I see a lot for complex coming through.
Yeah.
We got one fun.
We got a fun. Maybe somebody that needs to join our team, right?
Yeah, there you go.
All right, let's go ahead and share that. Everybody should be able to see the results. Looks like we've got 9 votes for complex, 11 for time-consuming, difficult, 7 votes. Yeah, we got a few out there for profitable. Kudos to those folks. We'll get into that later on. Well, I think everyone, we share the sentiment that you all are sharing with us, and that this is a difficult pay class, and it's one that requires some specialized tools and best practices to be able to tackle. And the funny thing about work comp, and what's strange is, it's just this massive entitlement program. It's not federally regulated, and I think that's where we get some of the answers to that previous poll, is if it's not federally regulated, then who kind of oversees how work comp works in my state? And the bottom line is it's state-run. Every state is different in how they handle work comp. The rules change from one state to another, and for the folks in the Southeast on this call, if you've dealt with claims from one state to another or extra-jurisdictional issues, it's a whole different ballgame just across the state line. How are claims submitted? How are injuries initially reported in your state? What services need to be authorized before my hospital gets paid? And then how are medical bills issued, and in what manner, and to who do I send them to? It could all be different from state to state. So what does your state say about expected reimbursement, and what does it mean to you from a revenue standpoint? Those are questions that we've got to ask ourselves for our respective states, because some states are very lucrative for hospitals. We handle work comp bills from all 50 states right now, and when you look at the most lucrative states, the Southeast probably has the greatest collection of states that pay hospitals the highest, if you want to use as a comparison to Medicare as an example. So the Southeast, and specifically this region for HFMA, is typically a really good state for work comp, but again, it varies state by state. And sometimes those variations are going to depend on the type of bill that we see. Does a large inpatient bill that maybe hits a stop loss, how is that reimbursed? Or what about my specialty outpatient services like physical therapy or radiology? Are those paid in the same manner or differently? So the good thing is, unless you are part of a system that spans multiple states, you really don't need to learn all the rules and regulations like EnableComp does. You can focus really strictly on the ones that impact the majority of your work comp patient volume and learn those to really excel at work comp revenue cycle.
Well, I think the best way now is let's take a level set of reality. I mean, if we think about how the work comp fits into the big pie there at your facility, one of the things we really need to realize is it's really 1% to 2% of the payer mix. So with that being said, we're asking for your teams to do an ultra complex task that's ever changing, given what Jesse just got through saying. And that means it's really going to require probably at least one or multiple full-time dedicated employees to handle such a task and do it efficiently and consistently. We just recently were talking to some of our clients, and one of the operators had shared with us that in any one given time, work comp can consume up to 10% of their billing office. Not consistently and not continuously, but you know how it all goes. Everybody gets fixated on one challenge, one big claim, and next thing they know, at the end of the week, 10% of the staff is working that work comp challenge. So you can see what that might do to the rest of their business workflow, and see what it does to the commercial side, where all the big money is, or the volume of money is. The other thing to realize too is the work comp payers. I mean, they're doing the same thing the commercial payers are doing. They're looking for cost containment. So they know they got the advantage because they write the rule book. B, they have all these technologies they use to administer these rules. And they're really outgunning you just in manpower as well. So the challenge really is, are you just going to settle for the payment they send you, or are you going to have a way to combat that and know what it is you really should be asking for? So I kind of painted a little doomy picture there. I didn't really mean to do it that gloomy, but I'm going to let Jesse explain to you why it's not a lost cause and we should move forward with this conversation.
There's a light at the end of the tunnel.
Yeah, maybe. And I don't think it's a freight train, but it might be.
Okay, good. All right. So when we talk about, how can hospitals be successful at work comp, there are really 5 basic questions that every revenue cycle leader should ask themselves with regard to work comp. Asking these questions and identifying, hey, how you can solve these, how I can answer these questions within my organization, or when I need to bring in a partner to help me with it, regardless of how you deal with it. These are really kind of the 5 points you want to start looking at. And they're certainly not an end-all, be-all for how to be successful at work comp, but it's a great way to get your program much further on down the track to work comp success. And really, we're going to get into the details of these throughout the presentation, but the first question is, where do I send the bill? It's one of the biggest hang-ups that we identify in work comp hospital billing is, where does this bill need to go? It's a different question to ask than what you handle with commercial and other types of pay classes. But for work comp, where that needs to go is key. How much am I owed? What do I need to set in my contract management system? How do I identify what I'm going to get paid on this thing? At what point do I stop appealing? At what point is my payment satisfied? How do I do that? Second thing is, how do I send it? Work comp is unique in how bills need to be sent. Different from other pay classes. You got to really answer the question is, just send it to the right place is only one part of it, but I need to send it the right way with the right stuff with it. And of course, lastly, and probably something you would apply to all of your pay classes, is how do I measure success? How do I know if I'm winning at work comp billing, even though it's a small percentage of my overall revenue? If I'm going to do it, I want to do it well, and how do I measure that? And the last thing is, hey, is this something I can do internally? Do I have the resources, the staff, the team, and the motivation to be successful, or is this something I really need to engage a partner in so I can be successful? Those are the things we're going to talk about today. And, let's start by getting into how to get the bill to the right payer at the right time. And let's ask the group, Ken.
Hey, well, let's go for another poll question.
Yeah, let's see who knows what we're doing here.
What percentage of the workers' comp bills go to the right payer the first time? This ought to be a good one.
All right, let's see here. Well, this is a fast group now.
Yeah, we'll figure it
out. 10, 20, 25. Okay. We've got 28 people done already.
How many 80%ers?
No, I don't see. 80% does not seem to be leading right now. I wonder why that is. Maybe these folks have worked work-comp before, huh?
Maybe so.
See, just a few more seconds. All right, Allie, let's share these results with our friends on the call here. Ken, what do we see?
Well, it looks like the 80% didn't win.
No, it didn't. Looks like most people said 35%. It looks like close between 35 and 65. But 35 is definitely going to win. Well, I guess we got some smart people on the call, right, Ken?
Looks like an opportunity there for a little bit of improvement.
Let's see what we're going to do about getting these bills to the right payer at the right time. Absolutely right for the folks that answered 35%. You got it. 65% of all bills are going to the wrong place, and this is a big problem within work comp. It results in your payment delays. You could have payment delays of up to 90 days or longer. The insurance companies are returning denied claims that were never theirs to begin with. You've got PHI problems. Hospitals are forced to investigate who the correct payer really should be. Then you got to track down their address. You've got to rebill and hope that you haven't violated any timely billing laws in your state. So not identifying the right payer and the right time is critical for your program. You want to make sure you're avoiding these delays and complete denials. At best, hospitals getting paid much later than they should, and at worst, it's a zero payment, going straight to your bad debt or getting written off entirely. This is not the right way to start off your billing cycle. But there are ways to be successful at that, and really where everything starts is your registration and your patient admission process. Identifying how your intake folks are identifying and dealing with work comp is critical. So I think if you haven't done this yet, or if you haven't done it recently, make sure you're working with your registration department on identifying two key pieces of information, okay? The first thing is, did this injury happen on the job? That's the first thing you want to ask people that show up into your ER or presenting at your hospital. Did this occur to you while you were at work? And the second thing is, who is your employer? Almost everybody's going to be able to answer those two questions unless they're unconscious in the ER, and then you want to ask whoever's bringing them, who their patient advocate is, those same two questions. But bottom line is you want to get the answer to those two things, okay? If somebody is bringing an injured worker into the ER, you're asking that person, who is their supervisor? And then what you want to do is you want to call that employer and speak to the supervisor of the patient if you can't get the information directly from that injured worker. But you got to get those two key pieces of information. Now, the question number one is, hey, did you get hurt at work? The answer is yes. You have a great likelihood that you're talking about a work comp claim here. And so now you've got to get the correct payer information to be able to send that bill and authorize that treatment per state regulations. Now let's talk a little bit about identifying who those folks are and how to move forward from there. Every state in the HFMA Dixie region has resources available to them at the State Board of Workers' Comp to identify who work comp carriers are for individual employers. And if you go, and we got a couple of screenshots up here, Allie, we're just showing this is Georgia. Let's see here, we've got Florida. And South Carolina has it as well. And let's go to another one. So go back a little bit. I think it's, so Tennessee as well. So what you do is go to your state websites, look for the Verify Workers' Compensation Coverage section, and if you click on that, it's going to take you to a section where you can put in the employer information, click the date of the injury that you're treating that person, and then it'll tell you who is the insurance carrier covering that employer for work comp at that time of injury. You are now light years ahead of the process to identify where to send that bill properly. And if you can incorporate that into your process, you're going to drastically increase the chances that the work comp bills that are going out the door are going to get to the right payer. And that's kind of job one for being able to identify who these work comp payers are, who are the carriers and or the bill review companies that need to adjudicate this claim and move forward with a payment. Now, once you identify where it needs to go, if this is not an emergent scenario, then you really got to focus on your authorization. Almost every state in the country requires authorization from the employer or the insurance carrier before you provide treatment to a work comp patient. I'm talking about the emergency scenario. I'm talking about non-emergent care. These are the scheduled surgeries, your physical therapy, radiology, all of that kind of stuff. You've got to get approval from the injured workers, employers or carriers before that happens. And I can tell you, the lack of getting authorization in work comp costs hospitals millions of dollars every year in lost revenue, because if you don't get it, it's almost an automatic denial. It's important to remember, so in the commercial world, we're talking about claims are paid based on eligibility. But work comp, it's all about compensability of the specific injury being treated and the documentation to support that treatment and the authorization. So payers are well within their rights to deny payment for treatment that was not authorized prior to the delivery of services. So it is a really good idea to make sure you're working with your internal staff to ensure that your non-emergent care is being approved by the payer before the patient's treatment. And you got to have that authorization documented so you can deal with that payment denial that pops up later on down the road. That never happens, right, Ken?
Never.
Okay, so if we get our authorization, we've identified where we're sending that bill, we've got the auth. Now we've got to really understand what am I getting paid for this claim, okay? Now let's assume that the injured worker is of the same jurisdiction that your hospital is treating in. We're not going to talk about out-of-state claims necessarily right now, but it comes up later. But you got to understand that the insurance companies pay hospitals, and this is what we see, the correct fee schedule amount only 32% of the time. So you've got the vast majority of payments that are coming from the carriers, okay? We're talking about the bill review companies and the carriers that are not paying the expected amount straight out the gate. Now, there's a variety of reasons why they're doing that, but you got to understand that the payments that are coming in the door for your work comp, the majority of them are not what they should be paid. This is what we see just by our history of doing this for the better part of 15 years. And if the hospital doesn't know what to expect, they're going to spin their wheels, appealing payments, missing other opportunities, and really not being able to focus on where they need to spend their resources. So, some portion of your claims are going to have jurisdictions outside of your state. U.S. Department of Labor is going to be outside of the state. For our friends on the call from Texas, we've got non-subscribers, which kind of fall outside of the state regulations. So there's a host of reasons why you're going to have reimbursable rules that don't necessarily follow your home fee schedule, but the vast majority of your claims are going to hit that home fee schedule. So it's important that you know what that is and being able to model that in your system so you can identify, hey, what do I need to get paid on this bill? And then you can go from there. So now here's the deal. Most states publish your fee schedule data on their website or give you access to a place to buy it for a few $100s. It's very important that you model it. If we take a look at the states in this region, South Carolina has a relatively simple fee schedule being based off of Medicare, 140% of Medicare. Georgia has a more complex one. We have issues in Georgia with how outliers are recognized, and there's some dispute among payers as to whether or not outliers are defendable, even though the state clearly says they are. Tennessee is a per diem inpatient fee schedule with a Medicare-based outpatient fee schedule. But again, that just changed again in February this year. So our Tennessee hospitals need to make sure that they've changed their contract modeling as of February 25th, 2018. And it may change again. Alabama, one of the higher paying states for hospitals, has a unique fee schedule that's hospital specific and negotiated by the Department of Industrial Relations every year. And then Florida, which has a per diem fee schedule similar to Tennessee, is constantly on the block for changing. Actually, right now, the hospital fee schedule, the physician's fee schedule, and the fee schedule for ambulatory surgery centers is all under proposed revisions for new fee schedules next year. And if those are ratified in the spring, we may see a new rule set for Florida hospitals and providers. So you don't need to understand all the different states unless you have a system that spans them, but it's important for you to at least understand your home state and spend some time in investing in understanding how your reimbursement works and make sure you invest resources into managing and monitoring how those changes occur. But I understand it's a struggle. And since fee schedules change sometimes frequently or maybe not at all, it's difficult to be able to appropriate time and resources to it. But it's really important that you spend focused on what is my reimbursable amount so I can move to the next step. And moving to the next step is how do I send it? Okay, so we talked about identifying where to send it. We talked about getting that authorization. Ken, we got to make sure we understand what we're going to get paid. Now we know all that. How do I send it? And sending it for work comp is unique in that you have got to include notes along with your bills. I can't tell you how many hospitals we come across that will send out medical bills by themselves. And payers will just deny them and send them back. Very rarely are they just going to cut a check on a medical bill if there's no notes to support the procedures that were done. You've got to be able to include those notes. You've got to be able to send the bills electronically as well. We'll talk about how notes become a difficulty with e-billing. But included with those notes is implant invoices. Most states require implant invoices if surgical implants are paid separately in your state fee schedule. Most states require you to send those the cost documentation along, and most payers are going to say, I'm not paying you a dime on your surgical implants unless you send that invoice along with it. Some states, like Florida, allow you to certify that amount. I'm actually on the UB, but again, if it gets before a state regulatory board, you got to send them the invoices. Other states don't allow for any reimbursable additional amount for implant invoices, so it's irrelevant there. But understanding what the state rules are in your state, if you can get paid extra money on implants, for the folks in Texas that have an opportunity to go either bundled or unbundled with the implants, invoices are required if they decide to break it out. You have to have a policy in place at your hospital on how to deal with surgical implants and the cost documents that go with that. So make sure you understand that, because if there's a reimbursable amount tied to surgical implants you can get, it could be a lot of money. You don't want to miss out on that. Sending the bills electronically is I guess, the new wave for work comp. Work comp is historically 2 decades behind everyone else and is just now getting into the e-billing world for the past few years. Right now we have 4 states that are mandatory e-billing states. Tennessee's the new one to add on that list. New Jersey has laws on the books. That will happen, I'm sure, at some point. Virginia will be going electronic billing as of July of next year. So we're starting to see more and more states that are mandating that hospitals send their bills electronically. And it's really important to understand that while you may be billing your other pay classes electronically, sending bills electronically via work comp may be a struggle for your current clearinghouse or your process because of the documents that are associated with it and have to be sent. So if you're not doing that right now, you need to understand whether or not you have a problem with compliance and are counter to what the state rules are, and there could be penalties and fines associated with that if you're non-compliant. The state decides to penalize you. But beyond that, sending bills electronically has an automatic impact to your overall revenue cycle, and that's something that you really want to focus on. 60% of work comp payers accept claim information electronically now, and a lot of them can pay you electronically. So sending your work comp billings electronically can increase your payment. It can accelerate your payment. We've seen 20% faster acceleration in cash through work comp bills that go electronically. And overall, it's just going to bring your process to a much more up-to-date and advanced way and eliminate the opportunities for error. So sending the bill the right way, I think, is key, and these 4 points are really what we want to talk about as we move on to the next step. And that's really, hey, if I'm doing these things, how do I know if I'm winning or losing, and how do I measure success?
Well, I think that's a good point, Jesse. I mean, it'd be a good chance right now to do some self-reflection, I guess. If we have the teams in place, which we all do, do we have a way to measure the success? Jesse mentioned this. There's a potential for a lot of rework with 65% of the claims going to the wrong place. So you can imagine the rework and how labor-intense that is. The other big piece of it is 32% of the times they're trying to underpay us. So you think of the labor-intensives and the specialty that we're expecting our staff to do. So with any process inside of any rev cycle or anything else, we need to have benchmarks by which we measure our success and have flags that set off to know if we're doing well or need to spend special attention towards whatever the task is. So I'll put up just a dashboard that we have. I stole it from the system, just as a pictorial is always better than a bunch of words. So there's a pictorial up there, and really the 2 points are days to payment in full. That's one of the things that you really need to focus in on. And what I mean by that is, what is the time frame where you can expect to have 100% of your payment? Now, what we've found is that the average is 90 days. We set a target internally, and we suggested you might do the same thing. Our target happens to be 60 days. So that's the yellow flag that goes off if things seem to be going a little bit awry. But the balance of our work we're able to accomplish within 90 days. Now, there's always outliers. Things go to litigation and things like that, and you're going to expect that. But here's some benchmarks that you can check your own pulse against and make sure that there's not a red light going off or an idiot light, using a car analogy, going off that we're not recognizing. The other one is the accounts receivable. If we won't monitor AR, next thing you know, AR is 90, 180, and out and beyond. So what's the best practice there, best policy there for AR over 90? And we set them typically around 30%. If it's less than 30%, again, none of the bells and whistles are going off. We're running along pretty good. As you start creeping up against 30 and over, special attention might need to be taken. So there's different ways I'm sure you have of your own, but if you don't, you need to come up with a process to actually know what's going on day to day. As we've already mentioned, it's a lot of money, big money at stake, and it is a real drain on our resources, which in work comp sometimes tend to be tasked as it is. So the best we can do in interviewing quickly, the better off it works out.
Ken, one thing to chime in on that.
Sure.
Is, absolutely, maintaining that AR over 90 in comp is difficult. Certainly, on the other pay classes, AR over 90 is much, much lower, and most hospitals will set a much higher threshold for their tolerance for AR for work comp. But when we talk about best practices in AR for work comp, that's AR to payment in full. And it's really important, as we talked earlier, about modeling what your reimbursement should be. Don't carry work comp claims as a percentage of charges if your state has a fee schedule. If your state says you need to get paid 140% of Medicare, make sure you're modeling your work comp to count each claim at that 140% of Medicare rate, or the Florida per diem, or Alabama percent of charge, or whatever it is. So you can really trust what that AR percentage really is, and it's an actual number of what's over 90.
Yeah, and before we move into the fifth point, if you have any questions or anything for Jesse and Ken, you can fill it out in the Q&A section. We'll get to it here in a few minutes.
Ken, let's talk a little bit about answering these questions internally, and does it make sense from a partnership standpoint, or do we have it here?
Let's keep it. Yeah, I think we go back and stay in the same self-reflection mode, and this one's a little bit of privately soul searching yourself. Is quietly or openly, I guess I challenge you when you get back with your teams. There's a handful of questions that you can ask yourself and really dig into what is going on in my team. Is it the best way to use my resources, and am I getting the best outcomes from it? The first question I guess I'd ask myself or ask the team is, who's handling my work comp now? And what I'm leading to on that is typically they may be your best collectors. So the real question is, remembering we're talking about 2 to 3% of your revenue, is it wise or is it not wise to have your best collectors working work comp, or should they maybe be over on the large commercial claims? Where's the biggest bang for the buck for your organization? The next question, going to a lot of what Jesse's talked about, do we have the information at the state level to build the fee schedules out? Do we have the tools to empower our team so they can look at the pricing claims and apply the PPO discounts and really have the highest level of confidence that they're asking and going after the right amount of money at the right time? Other point Jesse brought out is the state compliances. What about the e-billing? What about authorizations? Are we set up for success on that with our teams, or is this something that we might need some help with? And I guess the biggest thing at the end, which I just got off for a few minutes ago, is do we have the reporting so that we can manage these processes going forward and ensure we're being successful? I guess I'd submit to you, if you have any one or two of these that your personal answer comes back as no, that might be a challenge to do a little bit of additional soul searching, and you might want to look out for other partners like EnableComp to see if they can help you out. Jesse, why don't you put a picture together and kind of show what the success looks like?
Yeah, so having done this in many organizations where we've come into what we'll call an unmanaged program or maybe an unfocused program of work comp to kind of a full-on work comp environment where we're applying these best practices, it's really remarkable to see what happens to the payer behavior over the course of a program. And this is a sanitized version of a case study. And we've seen this time and time again. And what happens is you take your large insurers that are paying the claims, and I think if everyone on the call takes a look at where their work comp volume is coming from, over 50% of all your volume is going to come from about 10 payers, okay? And it's It's not going to be your local employers. It's not going to be the Amazon warehouse down the street or the local auto plant. It's going to be the large carriers that are writing property and casualty business in your state. They have the ties to all of the employers in your market, and they are driving business into your facility either by virtue of the fact that you're the ER in town, or you've got your managed care department has good PPO contracts with the payers, and your folks are on panels. But for whatever reason, the business is making it into your facility for work comp through these large carriers. Now, what happens is, if you look on the carriers in the yellow triangles, you can see that the average days to pay is on the left side. And, 76 days is what we're averaging for just a general work comp program. But what happens is when you start applying these best practices, you start to see that shift, and you start to see those total days to pay decrease. And when you move across the line, as the yellow payers turn into the green payers, you'll start to identify that the exact same carriers that were sending business into your hospital a year ago are now paying 23% faster because you have a managed program. You're identifying where to send those bills correctly. You're credible on the phone call with them because you know what your expected amount is. You're appealing claims smartly. You're sending documents and cost documents appropriately. So the amount of denials are decreasing and the cash acceleration is there. So not only are they moving across the spectrum left to right as you go from a normal work comp program to a highly managed work comp program, you're also increasing your total pay to expected. This occurs in every state, whether you have the usual and customary charge-based environment or if you're a Medicare or per diem environment. We see this across the board on average, about 10%, 9% increase in total reimbursement. And in some states, it's much higher, especially for systems that have trauma facilities. So it's really amazing to see what the application of just these 5 basic concepts can really do to a work comp program, and the results at the end of the day are measurable, remarkable. And I would challenge the folks on the call, if you're doing this internally, measure yourself, take a look at what your benchmarks are, and are you seeing days to pay kind of at below 60 days? Is your AR over 90, under 20 or 30%? If you're modeling your expectations, are you getting paid at 100% of what your fee schedule tells you should get paid, or a little bit more than that, or a little bit less, depending on what your PPO contract models look like? Those are good questions to ask yourself, but what we see in the marketplace is those are absolutely measurables, and they're things that we should be talking about on a regular basis within the billing world.
Well, getting close to the end here, and I just wanted to go back to the beginning with the 5 basic questions and feed the last roll of questions that hopefully we'll get at the end of this presentation. But if we reflect back, the challenge is, where do I send the bill? How much am I owed? How should I send it? Because that can really restart the whole process, just like, who do I send my bill to? How do I measure success? And quietly and behind the scenes, when you get back home, should I keep this in-house, or should I go look for some help? So I'd like to open it up to questions at this point, and I'll turn it back to Allie.
Yeah, so quickly, this PowerPoint will be sent out. It'll also be available on our website at EnableComp.com. But one question we did get in is, where can I find my work comp fee schedule?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think I alluded to it earlier in the presentation, but the best place to start is your state's work comp board. And you should reach out to your work comp board to have them point you in a direction. Alternatively, you can always email me or Ken. We can point you in the direction of your work comp, and I think Allie can pull up our contact information here. If you want to reach out to myself or Ken, say, hey, can you point me in the direction, we'll get it to you. Some states publish it free of charge, like Alabama and Florida. Georgia, I believe, has a small cost for theirs. That comes out every spring. But most states are going to be able to point you in that direction, or send it to me, and I'll be able to send you the right way. Good question.
Another question that we have is, how do you handle denials where workers' comp and employers deem they're not liable due to a stated reason, but patient states the accident occurred in the workplace and they bill workers' comp?
Okay, say that again. We've got the work comp patient is saying that it happened at work and the employer is denying the claim?
Yes.
Okay. Most states have a process where if the employer denies the liability, that is, they are well within their rights to deny the liability. It's not the provider's place to be able to contest the liability of the claim. However, at that point, the injured worker, if they truly feel it's a liable claim, needs to retain an attorney and go before an administrative law judge to have that claim denial contested. And this is where we get into litigated claims. And one of the things that we focus on here is, let's say the employer isn't denying the entire claim, but maybe just denying part of the claim as not related to the work comp. Here at EnableComp, we have a team that focuses on clinical review and a nurse and coder team that focuses on what were the denials for the services that were rendered, and do they tie into the original workplace injury. And we'll certainly assist our hospitals in getting paid on those denials. If it's a straight-up denial, 100%, the patient says it occurred at work, but the employer is saying, they weren't an employee, maybe they were a temporary worker, they tripped and fell in the parking lot, it's idiopathic injury, and the employer is saying absolutely not. That's really going to be between the injured worker and the employer in a legal setting. Now, if that ultimately becomes work comp at that point, it's going to come back to the hospital to pursue that bill. So it's important that you track those litigated cases. When you have a bill that is where the injured worker has retained an attorney, is now fighting the carrier or the employer for compensability, you want to make sure you keep an eye on those throughout the course of the litigation. So when that claim is actually done and the judge issues an order, if the order is truly for the injured worker, now you can go pursue that in the employer again for payment based on what the settlement is. So we do see those occur, and it's important that the hospitals understand how that system works so they can get paid ultimately when it's done. Now, if it's ultimately not work comp, then you've got to be able to turn around and bill the patient himself or the commercial carrier, whoever's liable at that point. But really good question, and one that does creep up in work comp for sure.
All right, we have another question. Do all states have a website to verify coverage?
No, not all states that I've seen have a coverage verification, but I believe everyone in HFMA does in this region. So South Carolina, Florida, Alabama, and Georgia all have coverage verification on their website. So if you're in a state outside of that, I guess it'll depend. I think some of the monopolistic states don't have that, like Ohio and Wyoming, but for this region, they do. Good question.
Okay. And the follow-up is there a place where you can get the available list of states on the website?
That gets back to the hard part about work comp being state-run and not federally run. No, there's really not a list anywhere of all state websites. If you want to reach out to me or Ken for the state you're looking for, we can point you in the right direction. But that's one of the unfortunate things is there's no giant repository, there's no Medicare.gov place you can go to get all the work comp information. You kind of have to build that for yourself for your program or bring in a partner that has it all.
All right. What if our work comp bills are denied completely?
We alluded to that a little bit earlier as denied for not compensable, but let's say you have a denial because they're denying the services that were rendered, and maybe that injured worker does have a compensable injury, but the services that were rendered are being denied. Now, I think the first thing you want to do is look at the EOB, right? So when you get that denial, it's important that you get the EOB or EOR from the insurer that's really identifying why this denial occurred. I would bet you that a vast majority of denials that we see just come from lack of documentation for our clients that before we bring them on. We take a look at what's going on in their program. They're sending out bills or getting a straight-up denial. It's not because the injured worker didn't have an injury, or it's not because it's not compensable. They just send any documentation along with their bill. Maybe they're sending it electronically, and their clearinghouse can't handle the documents. What's an immediate denial? It could be that no authorization was obtained. I've seen big six-figure surgeries completely denied because the hospital didn't get that authorization prior to. It's heartbreaking, but the rules are the rules in those states. If you don't get that authorization and the approval from the payer, it's a straight-up denial, and that's an easy problem to fix if you can build it on the front end. So authorizations are key. I think there's a lot of coding issues that we run into. I know specifically on my team we have a coding staff that doesn't do coding for hospitals, but it will review coding denials. And a lot of times work comp fee schedule, work comp rules may be back a year for what their coding conventions are, and while the hospital is coding all their bills for the majority of their current business, there may be a code that work comp is required to be last year's CPT set, or maybe the hospital doesn't pay these G codes, you got to do something else. So you may see a coding denial. I would focus on the EOBs and look very closely at what your remits are. Department of Labor is a classic example as a payer that loves to deny claims left and right, and I know everyone on this call deals with Department of Labor claims. They're the 6th largest payer in the country for occupational injury. If you look at those remits from your Department of Labor, you'll be able to identify very quickly what the denial reason is. It's either the condition that the injured worker has is not accepted. You've got to update the diagnosis in the DOL system and to get paid, and that can be difficult. But reading your EOBs is a great way to point you in the direction as to what the denial is, and then you can train your appeal staff to follow up on those EOB denials and get paid on them. So it's a struggle to understand where the denials come from, but denials management is a big part of the work comp revenue cycle process. So good question on how to deal with those.
Are there any tips for dealing with Department of Labor for federal work comp cases?
Hey, that sounds like something we just talked about. Yeah. So the Department of Labor, I guess I'll give a couple tips on it, but I'm not going to get too deep into how to deal with Department of Labor and Department of Energy. Department of Labor, first thing is understanding their fee schedule is very difficult. Department of Labor will pay hospitals. Sometimes they'll pay hospitals using like a hospital surgery will be paid at the APC rate, which is what is normal for hospitals in a Medicare environment. Other times they'll pay the physician RVRBS rate, and it's almost impossible to determine why. Department of Energy employees will sometimes get paid nothing on high-cost drugs, and sometimes they'll get paid full bill charges. So it's very difficult to understand how to model the DOL fee schedule for your particular services. I would say that it's not important necessarily to focus on the reimbursable amount. It's really more important to focus on the complete denials from the Department of Labor. So if you can eliminate your complete denials because either your diagnosis isn't updated in the system or the documentation was not submitted appropriately, I think you're going to be winning. But don't pull your hair out on whether the Department of Labor goes one way or another versus the type of reimbursement you get. Just try to limit it to 0 denials. That would be the best tip I would give for this environment. Now, if you've got a more specific question about DOL, feel free to email me after the webinar or give me a ring, and I'll get deeper into it with you. But good question, and one that we get a lot out there.
Is it common for mailed or faxed paper claims to process quicker than electronic submitted claims?
That's a really good question, and I want to say no, but in truth, we have seen scenarios where a faxed or mailed claim can process quicker. But that is rare. The vast majority of claims process much faster via electronic submission. But to be fully transparent, there are some payers out there that still have a better system for print and mail. So when we have run our turnaround time analytics, we have seen a few of those guys spit back faster payments through that, but we think that's eroding, and that's becoming less and less as the payer community really gets better and better at e-billing and e-payment. So the answer to your question is yes for some, but the vast majority is no. E-billing is the way to go.
Do you suggest billing a visit as work-related based on what the employee says at time of treatment, even if you cannot reach the employer for authorization, or do you suggest billing it as self-pay until the employee provides the proper billing information?
If you ask your injured workers, if this occurred at work, I would err on the side of, this is work comp. Certainly, if it's not emergent care, you need to be getting an authorization before the person even treats. So you shouldn't be in a scenario where you're treating an injured worker and you haven't got the authorization for that treatment. That just shouldn't happen. If it's an emergency scenario, then you ought to be doing the kind of follow-up, kind of a retro auth, if you will, although not every state, most states don't require retro authorization. Some do. So Yeah, no, you should err on the side of, yes, it's a workplace injury if my patient is telling me it happened at work, and then you'll be able to verify that later on when you do your authorization. And when you call to get the auth and the injured worker says, and the employer is saying, what are you talking about? That person doesn't work for me, or no, that's not a workplace injury. Now you know you may have a contested scenario or a self-pay scenario.
Is the expected allowed amount 140% of Medicare allowed amount of South Carolina?
That is the kind of overarching reimbursement for South Carolina, but there are some extenuating circumstances, specifically for inpatient-only type of status indicators from Medicare, other types of things that Medicare doesn't cover, like work hardening. So for the vast majority, yes, but I would recommend you download and read through the fee schedule to be able to model the other points that fall outside of that. But for the most part, that's true.
And what is the website to verify coverage for it?
If you go to the South Carolina Work Comp Division, I think we pulled up the slide there. I don't know, can you go back a few slides here, Allie? Let's see if we can pull it up just so everyone can see. There we go here. There we go. So if you go to the South Carolina Work Comp Commission website, highlight over insurance and medical services, you'll see that verify coverage link right there, and that should get you where you need to be.
Okay. I think that's all the questions that we have for today. We appreciate everyone attending.
And this is Ken. I'd really like to thank everybody for attending. And I'm looking forward. Everybody have a great Thanksgiving. And I'm looking forward to see everybody at least at Dixie and the first part of next year. So again, appreciate it and look forward to seeing you back on the home front.
Thanks, everyone.